This time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my top 10 on my favorite childhood comics growing up. Um, and again, I just want to say that I did most of my collecting from 1975 through 78, which seems like such a short period when I look back on it, but at that time, it seemed like a long time. So these are my top 10 from my childhood. Number 10, What If number 3. So, What If number 3, if you remember, What If was a series that looked at alternate worlds and what happened if they had changed a key Marvel storyline. And this is what if the Avengers never existed. And really, what it meant was in issue number 3 of the Avengers, the Avengers actually went to fight the Hulk. And it was a team up between the Hulk and Submariner against the Avengers. But this one was if the team broke up, just as Hulk was teaming up with Submariner. The thing that I really impressed me with this issue was the Gil Kane artwork with the Klaus Johnson inking. The two blended incredibly well, and there was some really stunning visuals of all the Avengers in Iron Man armor, which I thought was really very cool at the time. And then this one panel with Iron Man charging himself just before battle, which was just a lot of fun. And that was so. This is my number 10. My number 9 is Marvel Comics. Marvel's Greatest Comics 59. Marvel's Greatest Comics was a reprint magazine that reprinted older issues of Fantastic Four. So this is Marvel's Greatest Comics 59, which reprinted Fantastic Four 77, which was a Psycho Man storyline that had Galactus, Silver Surfer, Psycho Man, but the thing is, this was my very first Jack Kirby Fantastic Four. And the visuals inside of it were just amazing, stunning. Jack Kirby at this time period was at his zenith. And this was one of the most impressive magazines. And again, so this is my number 9, and only because it's lower because it was a reprint magazine at the time. So my number 8 is Brave and the Bold 118. Brave and the Bold was a monthly magazine that was basically the Batman team-up book. Batman teaming up with whoever. And this particular issue had Batman teaming up with Wildcat. And they were fighting the Joker. It was kind of like not the greatest story, but the visuals inside of it were incredible. Jim Aparo's artwork at this time was almost to Neil Adams. Very impressive. And the cover of this magazine was just, that's the thing that made me buy it. I mean, you have Batman and Wildcat in the boxing rings with these studded boxing gloves on, and it was just like, I want to read that book. And again, Brave and the Bold was probably the main way I consumed Batman books in the 70s. For some reason, when you went to the store, the Batman book wasn't there, and the Detective comic book wasn't there, but the Brave and the Bold was typically there all the time, and so I would always pick that up. And plus, Batman teaming up with anyone, I'm on board. So that was my number 8. My number 7, I already mentioned last month. My number 7 is Marvel Treasury Edition 14. That is the oversized book that featured the Spider-Man Morbius storyline, 100, 101, and 102. Really great, more Gil Kane artwork, guest starring the Lizard. Fantastic magazine, made me a Spider-Man fan in those young days. The next book is Giant Size Captain America #1. Yes, this is another reprint book. It reprints the early Tales of Suspense stories that Jack Kirby did. And they had mostly Chick Stone was inking them, but again, they were early stories Captain America this is his first single magazine in 20 years since the 40s that Marvel was producing, and it was a half book, meaning half of the book was Iron Man and half of the book was Captain America. But this was a reprint, so it was all Captain America stories, like I think the first 4 Tales of Suspense stories, and this really detailed artwork from Jack Kirby. Chickstone wasn't really the greatest Kirby inker, mainly because he embellished Kirby's pencils. He would really finesse it and find it. He would not give the raw energy that, say, Mike Royer would in the 70s. But these were really polished stories, amazing layouts and composition. And again, this is part of what made me a Kirby fan, was this book. And that leads me to my number 5. My number 5 is Captain America Annual number 3. Captain America Annual number 3 was when Kirby returned to Captain America during the 70s. As most of you probably know, he was at DC for the early 70s doing Jimmy Olsen and the Fourth World books, then Commandy and also Demon and OMAC. But by this time, in 1976, he had returned to Marvel, and one of the books he was working on was Captain America. And this annual had this, it's a silly story. Cap goes to find this down spaceship, this really peaceful looking alien. You find out that he's some sort of cosmic vampire, and he's really an evil entity that should never have been let loose. And it has this one splash page that is embedded in my brain, and I would just look at this and go, that doesn't make sense, but the composition is just amazing. And again, this is why it's my number 5, Captain America Annual number 3. Now, my number 4 is another Captain America book. Captain America Bicentennial Battles, 1976. Kirby's return to Marvel. He's working on Captain America. One of the books that he did was an oversized Treasury edition, single story done in different chapters of celebration of America, starring Captain America. Not the greatest stories, but it has some really great visuals in it. It was inked by a few different people in the book. One of the really kind of weird, interesting inks is Barry Windsor Smith. Barry Windsor Smith, who's best known for Conan the Barbarian, inked the first chapter of this story, and it's really different. I don't know if it's good, bad, but it's so different. It looks like Barry Windsor. So Bicentennial Battles, because it's oversized, it was celebration of America's 200th birthday. It was 1976. I was all on board. By Captain America Bicentennial Battles. Yes. Now that brings me to my number 3 book, Fantastic Four 176. Now, at this time, during the mid-70s, George Perez was doing 2 books. One was Fantastic Four, and the other was Avengers. Now, this issue features the return of the Impossible Man, who hasn't been seen since issue 11, I think. And this was Impossible Man, drawn by George Perez, written by Roy Thomas, and it was a fun issue. Basically, Impossible Man returns to New York, floats into Marvel Comics offices. And so we meet the interpreted versions of Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Roy Thomas, Lin Win, and it's kind of idealized versions of them, and it's funny how they interact with Impossible Man, and it's just this amazing George Perez artwork. And it was so much fun when I was a kid, and that's why it's my number 3. Also on that issue, the main splash page, the beginning splash page, is just this amazing close-up of the Thing. And it was, again, impressive artwork throughout the entire book. Now, that brings me to my number 2. which is Marvel Special Edition Spectacular Spider-Man. I talked about this last time. This is the large Treasury edition that featured 3 Ditko stories. Sinister Six, the Lizard origin story, and the return of Molten Man. Again, it was my introduction to Ditko, Spider-Man, and I just absolutely love this. Now, my number 1 is a little different because it's 2 books. Avengers Annual 7 and Marvel 2-in-1 Annual 2. Now, it's 2 books because it's actually interconnected stories. It's basically the Avengers versus Thanos. Yes, Thanos. This book was written and drawn by Jim Starlin in the mid to late 70s, and it has this amazing storyline of the Avengers versus Thanos. He's after one of the Infinity Stones in this. It guest stars Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock dies in this, and he comes back, and then it's the death of Thanos, and we wouldn't see Thanos again for 20 years. They would keep him dead. This was the artwork, the story, the combination of all this space opera drama. It was just, for a kid my age, 13, 14 years old at the time, it was just the best comics could be. I can't tell you how often I flipped through these books, how much they impressed me, how much I wanted to draw like Jim Starlin when I was a kid. And that is my number 1, Avengers Annual 7 and Marvel 2-in-1 Annual 2. Now, if you like this video, please click the like button or subscribe but also leave a comment. Tell me what your favorite books were when you were a kid. And I really thank you for watching.